It's been nearly 2 decades since Hollywood's golden couple shattered into pieces. But just when the world thought Jennifer Aniston had finally moved on from Brad Pitt, she opened up, and what she said stunned even her closest friends. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a tell-all interview. It was something far more vulnerable, because for the first time, Jen hinted at the pain she buried for years. And though she never named names or used harsh words, what she did reveal left fans reeling. What really happened behind the scenes of their picture-perfect marriage? Why did she stay silent for so long? And what exactly did Brad do that made Jennifer say, "Enough"? This wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation. And Jen finally let the mask slip. There was a time when Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt weren't just a couple. They were the couple. The Hollywood fairy tale that seemed too perfect to question. She was America's sweetheart, riding high on the success of Friends. He was the heartthrob of his generation, starring in box office hits like Fight Club and Ocean's 11. When they walked a red carpet together, the flashes didn't just flicker, they exploded. But behind the dazzling smiles and designer gowns, something quieter was unraveling. While the world saw glossy magazine covers and matching Oscars night glows, Jennifer was watching her marriage slowly shift into something colder. And the scariest part? She didn't even realize it was happening at first. In early interviews, Jen described their life as simple. "We have a beautiful home, a great dog, and we're both really busy, but we make it work," she once said. But buried in that statement was the very thing tearing them apart. Distance. Emotional, physical, and eventually spiritual. Brad was beginning to grow restless. Jen was trying to hold it all together. What many people don't realize is that Jennifer never wanted a Hollywood marriage. She wanted something normal, a safe, private love that could thrive outside the noise. Brad, on the other hand, was being pulled deeper into a world of artistic reinvention, fame, and increasingly bold roles. The alignment that had once brought them together was shifting, and neither of them had the tools or the time to stop it. Their friends saw it before the tabloids did. Whispers began about misaligned schedules, separate vacations, awkward red carpet body language. Still, Jen held her ground. She kept showing up, kept smiling, kept protecting what little privacy she had left. Because the moment she stopped, she knew what would come next. And it did. In 2004, Brad signed on to star opposite Angelina Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The chemistry between them was undeniable, on screen and off. Rumors exploded overnight. But Jen, she didn't flinch. At least not publicly. She refused to believe what the tabloids were selling, clinging instead to the man she had built her world around. But what happens when you're the only one holding on? The turning point wasn't a scandalous photo or a media leak. It was silence. Brad stopped calling. He became distant. The man who once whispered dreams to her at night had stopped speaking altogether. And in the quiet, Jen heard the truth. He was already gone. They announced their separation in January 2005. Their joint statement was calm, respectful, practically emotionless. "We remain committed and caring friends with great love and admiration for one another," it read. But behind the scenes, Jennifer was crumbling. And yet, she didn't say a word. The media didn't just cover their breakup, they devoured it. It wasn't just a divorce. It was the divorce. Tabloid headlines screamed betrayal. Photographers chased Jen down Los Angeles sidewalks. The same public that once cheered them on now watched as she was slowly dismantled in real time. And still, she said nothing. When Brad and Angelina were photographed vacationing together in Kenya just a few months after his split from Jen, the world gasped. But Jen, she smiled through it. When he did an interview calling his life before Angelina dull and uninteresting, Jen didn't clap back. She let it roll off her, at least on the outside. But behind that quiet strength was a woman desperately trying to make sense of a love story that had been rewritten without her consent. What most people didn't know was that Jen felt humiliated, not just by Brad, but by the narrative. She was being painted as the poor woman, the pitiful ex-wife, while Brad and Angelina were celebrated as Hollywood's newest power couple. Even as she mourned the loss of her marriage, Jen was forced to watch the world romanticize the relationship that destroyed hers. In one rare interview at the time, she said, "There's a sensitivity chip that's missing." A small quote almost tossed off, but loaded with meaning. She never explained it, never followed up. But it stuck with fans. Because what kind of man publicly parades his new love while his ex-wife is still nursing the wounds? People speculated that Jen would release a tell-all. She never did. That she'd go on Oprah and cry about the betrayal. She didn't. That she'd attack Angelina in the press. Never happened. In fact, when asked directly, Jen famously said, "I don't have the luxury of thinking of myself as a victim. Life is full of choices and mistakes." But make no mistake, she was angry, just not in the way tabloids wanted her to be. Years passed. Brad and Angelina built a family, then a brand. Meanwhile, Jen focused on work, friendships, and healing behind closed doors. She kept her head down, refused to retaliate, and slowly rebuilt the version of herself that the breakup had shattered. But that silence, that refusal to lash out, didn't mean she didn't have anything to say. In more recent years, Jennifer has become more open. Not vengeful, not accusatory, but real. And in those vulnerable moments, a different picture began to emerge. She spoke about therapy, about losing herself in that marriage, about how she stopped recognizing who she was because she was so busy trying to be what Brad needed. She didn't say it with venom. She said it with pain. Because while the world was busy asking what happened, Jennifer was sitting with a different question entirely. Why didn't I leave sooner? That quiet admission, delivered not in a headline but in a conversation, was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't about the affair. It wasn't about Angelina. It was about how deeply Brad had failed her long before another woman entered the picture. The public betrayal was bad, but the private unraveling was worse. And when Jen finally allowed herself to say that out loud, that's when the heartbreak stopped being a rumor and became something else entirely, a reckoning. Jennifer Aniston isn't someone who lashes out, even when she had every reason to. In the years following her divorce from Brad Pitt, many expected Jennifer to snap, to speak her truth in a headline-grabbing exposé, to burn bridges, or to at least offer a public counter to the story being written without her. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into grace, into restraint, into silence. And yet, that silence was heavy. According to those close to her, Jen felt torn. Torn between her own pain and the fear of being labeled the bitter ex-wife. Hollywood has a way of punishing women who speak up, especially when their words threaten a powerful man's image. Jen knew that, and it's part of why she swallowed her heartbreak for so long. She once admitted in an interview that she didn't want to open that door, because once she did, there would be no going back. The press would devour it. Brad's team would spin it. And her truth, whatever it was, would be lost in a storm of public perception. So she kept quiet. She smiled on red carpets, took on new roles, focused on friendships and her career, all while carrying the weight of a story she never told. But silence doesn't mean forgetting. And it certainly doesn't mean healing. What viewers never saw was the therapy, the internal struggle, the endless questioning. Was I not enough? Did I miss the signs? Was it my fault? Because when you love someone as deeply as Jen loved Brad, the betrayal isn't just about losing them. It's about losing the version of yourself that existed in that love. Years later, when asked why she never lashed out, she said, "There's dignity in keeping certain things to yourself. And sometimes the loudest thing you can do is say nothing." It was subtle, elegant, but the message was loud and clear. She had stories, she had truths, but she chose peace, at least until now. Because recently, Jennifer has started reflecting out loud in ways she never did before. Not with anger, but with honesty. And in those reflections, the cracks in her silence are finally showing. She's begun to talk about what it means to be betrayed, not just by a person, but by a system. A public that turned her pain into punchlines. A media machine that celebrated the very relationship that destroyed hers. And maybe most painfully, a man who never defended her when she was being torn apart. In one of her more vulnerable interviews, Jennifer revealed something quietly devastating. that during her marriage, she stopped recognizing herself. She didn't say it dramatically. There were no tears, just a woman looking back at a younger version of herself and realizing she disappeared somewhere in that love. "I gave so much of myself trying to hold it together," she said, "trying to be everything I thought he wanted. I didn't even notice I wasn't happy." That's the part most people miss. The betrayal wasn't just the affair or the media circus. It was the years Jen spent reshaping herself, suppressing her instincts, compromising pieces of her identity, just to make the relationship work. She became smaller, quieter, nicer. Even in the way she described her pain to the public, there was a softness, a gentleness, but inside, it was chaos. She felt discarded, not just by Brad, but by an entire industry that had built her up as the lovable girl next door, only to reduce her to a tabloid punchline the moment she was no longer half of a power couple. For a while, Jen tried to convince herself it was just timing, that maybe Brad had changed, or that they wanted different things. But deep down, she knew better. She knew that what hurt most wasn't losing Brad. It was realizing that the man she had loved so fiercely was capable of letting her go so easily. There's a kind of pain that comes not from betrayal, but from indifference. And Jennifer felt it every time Brad gave a glowing interview about his new chapter, while never once acknowledging the wreckage he left behind. She didn't want revenge. She wanted recognition, not just of what she lost, but of how she was treated. Because the man she married, the one she shared dreams and doubts with, didn't just move on. He erased her from the narrative, as if their years together were a minor footnote in the grand story of his life. And that's what broke her. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, a slow unraveling of trust, identity, and self-worth. Jen eventually stopped trying to make sense of it. She focused on rebuilding herself, on rediscovering who she was without Brad. And it took years. But even now, with all the growth and distance, there's a thread that still tugs at her when his name comes up. A hesitation in her voice, a glance to the side, that flicker of emotion that says, "There's still more I could say, but I won't." Because while Jen has come a long way from the woman who stayed silent, she still chooses her words carefully. But make no mistake, when she talks about that time in her life now, it's with a clarity and rawness that wasn't there before. And as fans listen more closely, they're realizing something Jennifer never had to say outright. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was emotional betrayal. It was being erased. And it was something that, even now, she's still healing from. Jennifer Aniston has never once used the words, "He was disgusting." But for many fans, that's exactly what they heard, between the lines of her silence, behind her composed answers, and inside the vulnerable reflections she's only just begun to share. Because when Jennifer speaks about that chapter of her life today, the words may be measured, but the emotions are not. She has described being invisible in her own marriage, that she wasn't being seen, wasn't being heard, and that the man she loved was slowly disappearing before her eyes. And when someone you trust makes you feel that small, that forgotten, disgust isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the cold realization that someone you gave your heart to treated you like an inconvenience, that your loyalty was met with silence, that your pain was ignored. In a recent interview, Jen admitted that she looks back now with a mixture of sadness and disbelief, not just at how things ended, but at how she accepted so little for so long. She said, "I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was a little less emotional, maybe he'd come back to me." That quiet desperation, the feeling of begging for crumbs in a relationship that once felt like home, isn't just heartbreaking. It's humiliating, and that's where the word begins to take shape. Fans have taken to social media, drawing their own conclusions, interpreting her reflections through their own heartbreaks. And many have said it for her. He was disgusting, not because of a single act, but because of the emotional neglect, the dismissal, the way he made her feel like she was the problem, when all she ever did was love him. And while Jen may never say those words herself, the truth is clear in what she has said. She was emotionally abandoned, dismissed, disrespected, and she's finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of it. What Jennifer couldn't, or wouldn't say, her fans are saying for her. Since her recent comments about the emotional toll of that relationship, clips have gone viral. TikTok edits, Instagram reels, fan essays. Women across generations are coming forward to say, "I felt what she felt." They saw themselves in Jen, not just because she was the girl next door, but because she was the woman who tried to be enough for someone who never truly showed up. And now, they're showing up for her. Thousands of comments flood her posts. "You deserved better. You were never the problem. You carried that pain so gracefully, and we never knew." There's something powerful about watching a woman finally reclaim her story. Not with vengeance, but with honesty. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Jennifer Aniston's strength isn't just in how she survived the most public breakup in modern celebrity history. It's in how she carried the silence, held her dignity, and still found the courage to speak on her own terms. Today, when she speaks about Brad Pitt, it's no longer through the lens of loss. It's through the clarity of survival, of self-worth, of someone who finally realized she never needed to chase love that made her shrink. She's not interested in rehashing old wounds, but she is willing to share the lessons they left behind. And that, in many ways, is the most shocking part of all. Because Jennifer Aniston didn't just survive Brad Pitt. She outgrew him, and in the quiet strength of her voice today, fans don't hear a woman longing for the past. They hear a woman who found her way back to herself, without needing his apology. She may never say the words out loud, but she doesn't have to, because the world is finally listening. For more of the latest news, check out this video.